Welcome to the If I Had More Time podcast hosted by Mariners Church. This series invites you into a casual conversation with our senior pastor, Eric Geiger, and our teaching team to hear a few insights and truths they wish they had time to include in the weekend message. We hope you enjoy it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to the If I Had More Time podcast. I'm here with Eric Geiger, our senior pastor, and Steve Bang Lee, the lead pastor at our beautiful North Irvine congregation.
Bang, bang.
It's great to be here.
Come on, we're so glad you're here.
Are you an NBA fan at all, Liz?
I'm so sorry. I'm not.
When's the last time you watched an NBA game?
I dare say never.
Have you've never watched an NBA game?
I believe that's a true statement. From start to finish.
Because I know you. It's not like you're not a sports fan. You're a big Georgia football fan.
I love college football, and I can get down with some NFL football, but I'm so sorry.
No basketball.
I don't understand it, so I think it's
Okay.
because I don't understand. But if I studied it, I could get excited.
See, if you knew I knew just right then because you didn't laugh when I said bang, bang, because his name, Steve Bang Lee, but
Yes.
there is a famous announcer in the NBA,
Mike Breen.
who every
We
time
love
there's, it's awesome. I
Yes.
think about Steve Bang Lee every time I listen to Mike Breen.
That's so sweet.
It is sweet, thank you. Because when there's an amazing play, Mike Breen will go, like when a crazy shot happens, he'll go bang!
Correct.
And occasionally he does a double bang, where he goes bang, bang! But there's never yet been a triple bang.
Not yet. Not yet.
And I think people have asked him, will there ever be a triple bang?
What will it take for, what we call a double bang around here is when Bang teaches 2 weekends in a row.
Oh, bang, bang!
Wow.
It's a bang bang.
Wow, there it is. There it is.
When's the last time there was a bang, bang?
At North Irvine, probably in the
Yes,
last
that's
year.
correct.
And
Yeah.
do you
I don't even recall.
do the people at North Irvine, when you do that, do they yell out bang, bang?
No, they give a triple bang.
There you go.
In the room, it's a triple bang. Mike Breen will catch up eventually.
That's awesome.
Oh my
So if you want to laugh, just look up, just YouTube Mike Breen bang, and then you'll rethink of Steve Bang Lee differently.
And the Steph Curry bangs are the loudest.
He-
ones.
he-
they are the most
really-
electric.
He-
Unbelievable.
He goes crazy. And Jason Tatum, he does
Agreed.
some Jason Tatum bangs too.
Wow.
I'm sorry, this has nothing to do with
But
the
personally, this is the most insightful podcast I've ever tuned into.
I was just about to say, I'm being educated
I'm
right
trying
now.
I'm trying to help and educate the church.
It's true. It's true. This is discipleship right here. That's
Yeah.
good. That's good. Well, we are in week 5 of an amazing series, Stories Jesus Told. And this week is a story about the end and what happens now. It feels like it could be a part 2 from
Yes.
last week.
That's right.
So,
Felt
Eric,
that way.
right? Yeah,
Good.
it did. It really necessary though. I didn't realize it, but it did. It felt a layer deeper, kind of some how to.
Yes.
And Eric, I'd love for you to share a little bit. I mean, end times, and then this being on our resources and what God's entrusted us
Yep.
with. How do these two go together?
So if you've been in church for any season of time, you likely have heard someone talk about the parable of the talents. But if you don't study it in light of the whole text, you'll miss that it's really has some end times context to it, because it's right after the parable we looked at last week
right.
of the 10 bridesmaids, 5 being prepared and 5 not being prepared. So just remember the context. Matthew 24, where Jesus says, hey, no one knows the day or the hour. Be ready. And then he tells a story. 5 of the bridesmaids are ready, 5 are not ready. And he ends the story with, no one knows the day or the hour. And immediately after that, he says, and the kingdom of heaven is like a man who goes on a journey, and he gives talents to different people, 5, 2, and 1. So it is so fascinating that he's speaking of this really macro idea of the return of him to this world to set up his everlasting kingdom. And yet he gets super nitty gritty about, and your place in the kingdom is going to be determined based on your stewardship of what you have right now. And so I just have pastored a lot of people who get really fascinated with end times discussions. And so I just kind of imagine Jesus saying, no, I'm not here to give you a chart. Let's talk about how you spend money this week.
Ugh.
I mean,
Yeah.
they're doing this really mega conversation about the end times, and hey, what's the mark of the beast going to be? Let's talk about how you spend your paycheck. and that Jesus connects how we manage resources to the conversation about end times. It's really fascinating to me that one of the most famous parables about resource management is in context of the second arrival of Jesus.
That really is insightful. And it makes me think, the times when I want to disobey without really disobeying, I just want to speculate. I want to be a very, very speculative. I want to kind of just give me some insights. Give me some insights on it. And I love that Jesus does not let us just simply speculate about the end times. He makes it gritty.
Right.
He makes it personal. He makes it earthy.
That's true.
Concrete, tangible.
Yeah.
It's something he would do. It's something
Because you can't get more tangible than
correct.
I mean, all three of us, we talked about this before we hit record. All three of us spent money today.
We did.
There's a lot of things we didn't do today, but we spent money. And so talking about nitty gritty or tangible, he connects a common practice that everybody does. There's different units of money and different ways that people engage in commerce throughout human history, but all of us have some resources that we steward, and he connects that to everlasting life. Not we earn everlasting life, but I know we'll talk more about this, but our responsibility in his everlasting kingdom being determined by our faithfulness today. Yeah. It's really, it's like all of his parables so far. It's shocking.
It's shocking.
It's a shocking statement.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and go there.
Yeah.
Talking about our responsibility. I mean, man, this passage really does present it in a staggering way. When I read that, and I love where you called it out, that he says it twice, two different people,
Yep.
two different things they were entrusted with. But the share in your master's joy, that caught my attention
Yep.
a lot. And when I consider the joy of the Lord, the joy of God and what he delights in. And anyways, this whole idea of my stewardship and the responsibility that God has given me, that actually being connected to my joy is beautiful.
Yeah. It's a beautiful picture of everlasting life. Share in your master's joy, that life in the eternal kingdom is going to be filled with an inexpressible, incalculable joy, one we can't fully even comprehend, because it's his joy. So there's no one more joyful than God.
Yeah.
He is full of joy, full of holiness,
Life.
full of wisdom, full of
Yep.
life, and we get to share in the divine attribute of his joy. So everlasting life, we're sharing in our master's joy.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
There were two elements that he said to both the servant he gave 2 talents to, and talent being a unit of money, and 5 talents. He said, share in your master's joy, and you were faithful in a few things, I'll put you in charge of many things. So there's a lot of questions that people have about heaven, and this passage is not an exhaustive list of the qualities of heaven or what will be in heaven.
No.
But we do see 2 things: sharing our master's joy and increased responsibility based on our stewardship here. Yeah.
It's profound in how my view of heaven is reshaped by that.
Yeah.
You shared that really funny story about like that one person who was like, "No, we're just gonna be singing." No, there's some stewardship responsibility aspect. So the next life, it shapes my view, but it actually even reshapes my view of stewardship now.
Yes.
Like, if there's stewardship in heaven with joy attached to that, what does stewardship now look like, and how is joy attached to that now?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so there's this beautiful implication of the life to come,
Mm.
but also the joy and stewardship now, in
That's
the
good.
here and now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so
It's another part of our stewardship and our generosity is our worship too. It's a reflection of God's beauty. I was reminded of it whenever you were just saying that there's no one more joyful than God. I've never thought about that
Mhm.
before. And to steward well, and to be generous ultimately, it is a part of our worship as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Eric, if I could ask you a question, there was a moment when you were talking about that third servant, and he didn't view the master accurately.
Right.
So, the language that
That's a tough part of the passage, right?
it is.
Yeah.
But, enter master's joy. He's the kind of master that will give you a ton of talents to steward. There's some fun.
Yes.
There's some delight. There's some excitement.
Yes.
Right. And there was this moment where I realized, man, stewardship and generosity, it's so tied to viewing God as a God of joy, life,
Yep.
hope. Could you speak a little bit more on how our view of God as he truly is fuels that stewardship and generosity?
Yeah. Yep. So the unfaithful one says, I knew that you were cruel and harsh, and you even reap where you didn't sow, which when you study the text, you realize he's accusing the master of being a thief. You're
Wow.
taking crops from places you didn't even sow. Now, theologians, scholars, you can read different takes on that interaction in the parable, because it's the master in the story Jesus is telling doesn't refute. He basically kind of plays along. Says, "Oh, if you really think that's who I am, then why didn't you at least take the money to a bank?" Now he's not. He's the same one who says, "Share my master's joy." So he's not that. He isn't a cruel master, but he's basically leading the unfaithful servant to realize the hypocrisy of his statement. So you're saying that I'm cruel, then why did you act so foolishly? That is the reality. And then this is another parable where when people say, "Hey, Jesus is never tough," you're like, "Have you read Jesus?" Because the parable ends with Jesus saying, "Take that wicked, lazy servant and throw him where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth," which is clearly a statement about hell. It's one of the images given in the New Testament about hell. Now, we have to be really clear on this. It's not as if the guy went to hell because he wasn't a good steward. He went to hell because he didn't know the master. And it wasn't because that the two faithful went to heaven because they
That's right.
did well with the money.
Wow.
They went to heaven because they knew the master. But in everlasting life, their level of responsibility was determined by how faithful they were here. So we enter everlasting life not by our goodness, but by the goodness of Jesus to us. But our responsibility in the next life is based on, for the Christian, because this is only for the Christian. The non-Christian is where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Correct.
Yeah.
So those who are in everlasting life are those who belong to the master. And then the responsibility in everlasting life is based on how faithful we were with what he's given us here. So is that the question, Bang?
That was amazing.
What?
Yeah.
Ask the question again.
No.
Did I go on a
You
rabbit
got
trail?
it. No.
Okay.
But
That was
it's
amazing.
a great rabbit trail, because how we view him. I mean, anytime there was a moment in your sermon when I just thought, all the times where I felt the pull towards greed,
Yeah.
or all the times where I felt like generosity was painful.
Because we think he's stingy.
That's exactly what it
Yeah.
is.
And if we think he's share in joy, everlasting Father who loves us deeply, we won't have a sense of, I got to hold on because he's not going to give me more. The more we realize that he's very generous to us, the more that we become totally generous, right? The more that we realize he's really good, the more trusting we are of him.
100%.
This unfaithful servant was not trusting at all because he viewed the master as cruel. So yes, your view of God impacts how you relate to God. And this unfaithful servant had an inaccurate view of who God is.
Yeah. I love how our church talks about generosity, and this message is the perfect example of it is about our heart. And
Right.
I just went through Rooted, and this passage is actually what we teach on in Rooted Week 8. And over time, Rooted Week 8 has actually become my favorite week because it's like gets in people's stuff. It's vulnerable for people, and people get really honest whenever you start talking about money and stuff. And I had a guy in my Rooted group who's new to Mariners and relatively new to faith, kind of like grew up nominally. And he just said something, he started our discussion just like, this was the first time that I didn't walk out mad after somebody asked for money. And I loved it. And it's true. It's because there is not a reason to be angry.
No.
I feel so cared for because it is.
Mm.
It's about our heart. It's about our view of this master.
Right.
So all that to say, Eric, you didn't give an ask. Today,
Right.
today or this weekend's message was all about our hearts
Yeah.
and all about stewardship. So
And there's times that we do. There's times that we say, hey, I'm going to ask you to sign up for recurring giving, to fight greed in your life, be generous. And when I ask, I don't ask with marbles in my mouth. I really believe it's best for the person. And there's times that we share a vision, like we're going to launch a new congregation. It's going to cost this much. Let's go. Come on, please give. And then there's times where I just want the text to do some work in people's hearts. And this was that approach. This was,
Yeah.
let me try to lower the barrier that someone's not thinking, oh, he's going to like quote this verse to ask me to do this. Let me just teach the verse. And then he who has ears to hear, let him hear,
Yeah.
walk away and let the text do the work in people's lives.
Yeah, you mentioned another thing that's mentioned in scripture about how we can test God on this. This is one of the things.
It's like the only thing I think, Malachi.
It's the only one I know of, but I'm easily the third in line in this
You know
room.
of any
So
other
what do
place?
you
Oh,
got?
I don't either. I don't.
So he says,
Because there's
we
other
can
verses that
test
even say, don't test God.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, but on this case, because it's so challenging for you to let go of resources, especially in a culture where people didn't trust the banks, where the only amount of money they had could be what's coming in. And so we are very privileged in our current culture where, you can have investments protected, insured by the government up to $250,000 in a bank. And I mean, like we can rest. Now, obviously, your level of risk causes your portfolio to rise or fall. But regardless, you can trust banks typically here in the U.S., right? Very different in a context where people would bury money in fields.
That's right.
They would,
I was just about to say that.
yeah. That's that parable where Jesus says,
100%.
go buy a field because there's a treasure there. So for those people to be told to give was really, man, I'm only going to eat then if I get paid again. You know what I mean?
oof.
Yeah. So
That's big.
it is.
Yeah. So what does that mean? The idea of testing God that you referred to.
Yeah.
And is there a good way to do it? Is there a right way to do it? Is there maybe a bad way to test God? I think for me, what comes to mind is almost, hey, I'm going to give a bunch and I'm going to be bitter and resentful if within 6 months, a year, 18 months, if I don't see a return on investment.
Right.
That's not a good way to test the Lord.
No. Nor is it a good way to test the Lord which we don't have like a prosperity gospel approach.
Mm-hmm.
Which we're grateful for.
And a prosperity gospel, in case you're new to the term, even though Ed Stetzer, our scholar in residence, kind of preached on that several weeks ago in the On the Table series, would be a theology where a church or a pastor would say, hey, God wants you to be wealthy, and if you follow after him, he'll make you wealthy. And then Ed rightly warned against also the poverty gospel, where if you follow after God, you can't have anything. And we don't believe either one of those two extremes is accurate. Poverty doesn't sanctify you. Jesus sanctifies you. It means poverty doesn't make you holy. Jesus makes you holy. And prosperity doesn't make you holy.
That's right.
Jesus makes you holy. So testing him in terms of finances isn't, God, I'm gonna give you this, and then I want a brand new car.
Exactly.
Testing is, Lord, I trust you with the results, but I believe you're going to do something significant in my life because you've commanded me to give, and that there is blessing on the other side of obedience.
Yes.
Now, a church like us, I got to be honest, I have to be cautious because sometimes I'm so scared to teach that, and because I never want to give people the impression that your obedience makes you right with God. You're only brought right with God because of his obedience, the perfection of Jesus, his righteousness. And so, because I get nervous when someone talks about obedience and fails to mention that we're obeying because of what Christ did. However, I have to be careful, me as a preacher, that I don't fail to teach, hey, obey, and there is blessing on the other side of the obedience.
And that blessing, I mean, it can look so different, right? I mean, I had a friend who gave generously, And he had that classic story where he opens up his mailbox and there's a check in the exact amount that he was generous with. I'm like, what the heck? I never had that.
I've never had that story.
I've never had it.
The guy's been very good, generous to me, very good to me, but I've never had the check in the mailbox story.
Yes, but where I've felt the blessing is
I would like the check in the mailbox
very,
story.
very much so.
Just to have a cool story.
100%. But the blessing I have experienced is in the heart, relationally.
I have.
Going, oh my gosh, that was so good for my soul.
Yeah.
And so the testing, I felt like I got the blessing. I didn't get the check though, but it was still a great blessing.
No, it's the joy is a blessing. I have sensed God provide in deep ways for Kay and for our family and for me and for us and Kay and I have been. We started tithing, giving 10% to the church before we got married, and so our whole married life. And when we got married, I was making $12,000 a year. Actually, I was making $9,000 a year as a youth pastor. They gave me a $9,000 and $12,000 raise, which is a pretty high percentage. You know,
You're very valuable to them.
Yes, I was a highly valuable employee, and so I started making $12K, and she was working at a bank. I think she made like $5K. So we made like $17K when we got married, and we were tithing. There was a man in our church, Mr. Emery, who was the bank president, and he bought a house like really close to the church that I was youth pastor at, and then reached out to me and basically said, I bought this house to rent it to you. Like, this guy just loved us. He was so awesome. And I said, well, I have a place. He said, well, I had like this really tiny apartment. And he's like, no, but I think, why don't you come look at the house? Because he knew I'd like the house. And I said, I love it. I said, well, but I want to pay. He said, well, what are you paying now? I was paying $250 a month.
Oh, my.
Come on now. This wasn't in Southern California.
Wow.
And so he said, well, why don't you do that? So we paid $3,000 a year.
Wow.
For this house. So we were making $17K, but our total, that's actually percentage-wise way better than the calculators say, right? Like all the calculators say, I don't know, 25 to 50% or 40%, whatever, of your total income, whatever. Anyway, it was less than that. So even though we were only making, $17K or $3,000 on a house, but honestly, that blessing, I didn't have a check in the mailbox, but I had Mr. Emery buy a house essentially. He didn't give it to us, but he gave us a great deal on renting the house.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so I have seen just beautiful things like that happen our whole married life with us being.
That's such a beautiful story.
That's incredible.
My version of that is youth pastor. Were you working at a Korean church? No. But that my version of that is we're both in grad school and seminary, and a person in the church, wonderful, faithful, committed follower of Jesus. And she comes up to me one day and she says, how many more semesters of seminary do you have?
Come on.
And I gave the answer, and she said, well, good luck, and walked away. No, she said, I would like to help fund your seminary. So that was an experience.
So beautiful.
Thank you, Lord.
Yes.
You're so kind. You're so gracious.
Wow.
So I do think those things happen
Yeah.
when you are, when you're generous. I have a funny story, and Kay, I think I'm going to go ahead and share it. I haven't told anybody this. So we just finished doing our taxes.
This is awesome. You heard it here
so
first
cool.
on the
So
If I
I
Had
don't
More
know.
Time
I don't know if
podcast.
I'll use this as an illustration yet. So we, we're finishing this multiply campaign, and so we made the biggest pledge that we've ever of a gift 3 years ago when we did it, right? And we were going to do it over 4 Decembers. So I got the giving statement from the church and I was turning in my taxes just like 2 weeks ago. And so I'm looking at the giving statement from the church.
This is so funny. You sound like just a regular person, a part of our church right now. You received it did you receive it in the mail, like addressed to you guys?
What do you think? You think like there's a special one for pastors?
I don't know. You think
Of
like the senior pastor would have a different way?
No, it's the same thing.
That's awesome.
I give to our church. I get the same letter that you get.
But no one dropped it off for you in a really nice envelope?
Yeah, right. With on white gloves or something.
Exactly.
So that was like a regular giving statement.
It's awesome.
Yeah, so I get this in the mail, and so I'm filling out like this I have someone help me, but he has this pre-document, so I'm filling out our charitable contributions section, right? And I look at the details, and I realize that Kay paid twice for the multiply amount.
Like twice a month kind of thing instead of.
No, we did it once a year. So we're going to do it 4 Decembers, but she did it in September and December. So essentially, instead of us doing, we were going to do it over 4 Decembers, we did 5 payments instead of 4. So for the same amount that 4 should have been. You understand what I'm saying?
Got it. Got it.
So an extra 25% more
Right.
than what we had pledged. And so I went to Kay, and I'm so struggling because I now I feel this is why I don't know if I should share this because now we gave more than what we committed to give, and the gift that we committed 4 years ago, it was by far the biggest. I mean, I had this wrestle with God, and we were leading our church in a $50 million campaign, and I really believed I needed to give in such a way that I knew that I was sacrificing, that I would not be able to look everyone in the eyes and ask people to sacrifice if I didn't. So it was already,
Yeah.
and Kay just gave it 25% more.
Okay, but what I love it, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't this the one where you said for the first time you wrote down the bigger number than Kay?
That's true.
And so here she is. She beat you in the end.
In all our years of marriage, when we were invited to give to stuff, like Kay has the gift of generosity. I think I had the gift of obedience. Like I tithe because of obedience. And God's always been super honored. Man, Kay would give away. So, I mean, she would just give away. I'm like, baby, we have some things we want to do in our lives, right? She just give it all away. And so I knew when I went to her on this, that she would be like, oh, great. And so I was like, baby, but there was some other stuff that we were planning on doing that she manages. I do the investment. She manages the checking and the savings account. And so I said, so how much do we have in there? And it was way less than I thought we would have because we gave a whole extra.
This is so awesome.
But I'm just seeing this and I'm teaching this passage and having this conversation. I don't know what the blessing's going to be from that. But if I get my heart right, there will be a blessing.
So on that note, for the listener, if you're not able to see,
Kay literally said to me, she said, should I call the church and ask for it back? I said, maybe.
Did they do refunds?
First off, I don't know if anyone's ever called the church and asked for money back. And it's sure as heck not going to be us. Like, we are not going to call the church and ask for money back.
That would have been hilarious.
Like, there's no way.
Oh, my God.
There's no way. So, anyway, what were you going to say, Bang?
The beauty of this moment is, for the listener, when you're thinking about how do I invest in the next life? How do I, kingdom-minded?
Yeah.
I think what you're hearing is we're fumbling around. We're in process. We're learning. We're discovering. So for the listener, if you feel like, gosh, I don't have it dialed in. I'm not a pastor. I'm not on church at a stat. We're figuring it out. But the second thing is, for those who aren't able to see our faces, the joy, the smiles, the laughter.
That's right.
So going back to that, the stewardship and happiness and joy, I mean, we're seeing it in real time right now, even as we're recalling the memories and the experiences.
And the other thing is true, and this is already true about that amount, is it is true. You don't end up missing it. Like God, you in the end, you don't end up missing it. And then you know that you gave to his kingdom, and again, this is if my heart is right, assuming that Jesus keeps sanctifying me.
Yeah.
That I'm being a faithful steward, and that this short life, 70 years, 80 years, 90 years, I mean, come on, do we really believe that we're going to be in everlasting life for billions of years? That's crazy. If we really believe that, and then we really believe Matthew 25, then we want to manage resources the way the master wants us to.
That's right.
Yeah.
Which is why we ended with the give, save,
and
spend.
The benefit we're going to have in the new heavens and the new earth is we're actually going to be able to see the real impact of what our investments made. The earthly investments, we're actually going to be able to see it in real time.
Yes, totally.
And so,
yeah.
What joy.
Yeah, it would be hard to be laughing right now if the extra 25% was spent on something frivolous. If you had accidentally overpaid for something else in your life, I'm not sure.
No.
Or
that happens, and Kay on the phone, like, if she gets overcharged on something, woo,
that's
man,
right.
I just smile.
As she should.
She works those people down.
All that to say, She was joyful when you overpaid on Multiply.
She's totally fine.
She is great.
If I said, let's double that, she'd be like, let's do it.
That's so awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for all that you both have shared just about your personal journey with this. It's super helpful. Always great to hear and learn about both of you. So thank you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for joining us for the If I Had More Time podcast. Thanks for listening to the If I Had More Time podcast hosted by Mariners Church. We hope to see you next weekend at any of our congregations throughout Southern California or online. To view our locations and service times, be sure to check out our website at marinerschurch.org.